Good evening, guten Abend to everybody. It is the fourth Glückskinder Talk, kind of a mix-up between German and English, Germish. It is number 4 in a series for at least the entire year 2021, a series of interviews with inspiring people. And number 1, now in German, es tut mir leid, liebe Zuschauer, heute Abend das erste Mal Premiere auf Englisch und wird nicht zu häufig passieren. Aber dieser Gast, this guest tonight definitely inspires me to catch a free of charge communication training for myself, and is John Doorbar, whom I met exactly 1 year ago. He participated in a so-called Mutmacher challenge, a YouTube challenge I initiated, and he participated in there, and we had some extremely nice conversations over the last 12 months. I never met him in person due to Corona, but one day we will change that. Until now, I always met him live online as you do tonight, but maybe let's first start to introduce himself. So here comes John Doorbar.
Oh no, I've just received this email. I've got to give a presentation on Wednesday in front of an international group of executives and business people, and it's all got to be done in English. If you've had this situation and you felt really fearful, very afraid of standing in front of a group, then you're not alone. And if that's the case, you're in the right place here. I've had lots and lots of people who've come to me because they've been low in confidence, particularly when they stand up in front of an international audience. What I do is I teach them 6 practical tools for dealing with their confidence in an international situation. At the end of it, they stand up, they feel a lot more themselves, and they get good feedback from their audience. If that's the situation you're in, just give me a call and I'll be pleased to chat with you for a few minutes to see how I can help you.
Welcome, good evening, John.
Good evening, Christoph, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening.
It's a true pleasure having you in the show tonight. Welcome, John. And I don't know how many times over the past 12 months, how many hours actually we already spent talking about this and that. And so, but we never really spoke just purely about John Doorbar.
Yeah, yes. So
John, tell me, who the heck is John Doorbar?
Well, Christoph, that's a very good question. I'm English for a start. So John Doorbar. I come from the northwest of England, and I've been fortunate to have been living in Germany now for 35 years. Before that, I was in Italy, and I'm lucky too that I really enjoy what I do. I've looked for many, many years to find out something that I really like doing. And so the main topic which I work on now is helping people to present in English in an effective, clear, and inspiring way, so that they're not nervous, they're themselves, they're able to come across as just relax, as if we were having a conversation with each other now, as you and I are, Christoph.
Yeah, but let's clear it out. You are not an English teacher.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
So it's a purely a B2B business presentation, communication, like that. Is that true?
Exactly. That's a really good point, Christoph. So I don't train people in linguistic skills. I train people to be able to use these linguistic skills in specific business situations. And in this case, it's to do with presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So they already come with a good basis of English. They can speak relatively fluently. And my job is to help them to be able to, I wouldn't even say perfect their skills, but to be able to speak in a way that they come across professionally to their audiences, fellow business people, and also with a touch of humor, hopefully, so that it's not too serious what they bring across. Professional, but not too serious. That's the sort of the mixture that I try to promote.
Well, but the John Doorbar I met is much, much more than just this tiny fraction of business communication. But you just said 35. Did I hear that right? 35 years?
35 years. 35
Holy
years.
Oh my goodness. How did that happen?
Well, that's quite a long story, but to cut a very long story short, I was fortunate enough to study at university. I was able to get a position or a place to study at Oxford. Originally, I studied theology, and theology was something which I was fascinated by. And so I was very, very interested in that. And what I also was able to do was to continue with the theology by doing teacher training in religious education in combination with French and sports, largely rugby. And then I thought, okay, do I want to go back into the education system in the UK immediately after having studied? And I said, no, I want to see the world. So my grand design, my big plan was to live in Italy for a couple of years and then to go back to my home. A bit like The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, you know, an adventure, a little adventure, then to come back again and to settle down. And in fact, I had the opportunity to get a job in Mannheim. And as a result of that, I started to get really inspired by the whole area of learning, teaching, communicating.
Mannheim, is that a city in the northern part of Italy?
No. Mannheim is actually in Germany.
You applied for, if my plan is go to Italy, how did it end in Mannheim?
Yes. Well, that's a funny question because it was a practical point. I earned 700,000 lira in Italy, peanuts.
Yeah, to translate that into real money, that is something like 300 euro.
Exactly, yes.
350 euro a month.
Exactly. So,
wow. Okay.
The pizzas were not too expensive, but basically, I decided to try somewhere fresh where I might be able to build up a business which was more profitable. And that's how I came to get a job in Mannheim. It just happened to be the place where I was offered a position.
So you didn't run out of gas on the way back north?
No.
Okay.
I was okay.
Oh man, okay. So how has Germany been to you? How is it as a foreigner to live, to work in a former enemy country?
Yes.
Sometimes if you read The Sun, still today, a kind of a weird country.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Christoph, and that is in fact the image which a lot of people still have of Germany, and I see it very differently, because lots and lots of my very best friends are now German. And what I noticed when I first came here was that there are completely different traditions for even getting to know people. In England, you go to the pub and you just get to know somebody who's sitting next to you. You say, where are you from? And well, I live down the road. I come here twice a month. Ah, right. Well, I'm not far from here either. And when I was very naive and didn't know much about the German traditions, I tried that in a German pub. and you might can probably imagine what happened. I said, there's a guy sitting next to me. I said, hello, and he said sort of hello, and I said, oh, where are you from? Mannheim. Oh, that's interesting, very interesting. And do you work at one of the big companies in the area? We have a lot of big companies in the Mannheim area. Yes, he says to me. And this went on for 5, 6, 7 minutes, with my questions. And I could see that the style was completely different from the way in which we would just start up a conversation with a simple question and it would flow. But that's not the way it actually works here. But you have to know that. Otherwise, it's not the social situation where people would expect to be spoken to by a total stranger. That was an interesting baptism when I was trying to get to know people when I first came to Germany.
Mm-hmm. So if you look after 35 years, I don't know, do you still have an English passport, a German passport?
I do actually, Christoph. I am half British and half German now. So okay. I have dual citizenship.
Okay. So how did you experience, how was it for you those past, let's say, roughly maybe 3 years with all this Brexit, the probably a bit bumpy road the English chose, and how did you experience that? What's the viewpoint of an Englishman?
Yeah, an Englishman in
New
Germany.
York.
Not in New York, but
Mannheim.
in Germany. Yeah, it was actually very difficult because on the one hand, I was here in the center of Europe, and on the other hand, people in my family were voting for Brexit. They actually did vote for Brexit. They're from the northwest of England, and they're in a socially disadvantaged area. So they're not very wealthy, and they saw that the political direction that we had in England was very biased towards the middle class and more wealthy types of people, and so there was a clear divide between the haves and the have-nots, which was also between the north and the south. There was quite a wide divide. And so I could really empathize with these family members. And it was not all the family who voted for Brexit. But on the other hand, I totally disagreed with them. Simply because I think in any situation, we're better off if we work together. And the whole idea of Brexit is to separate from something which has at least been working partly for such a long time, and we've had no wars. And that's a really important point. We've had peace for so long that in itself, it has a lot to be said for it. So to cut a long story short, it's just, in my opinion, it was an unfortunate mistake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are actually pointing towards a very interesting topic, which somehow also is related to your profession, because communication more or less is the opposite of dividing, of non-communication. It is but to build bridges, to feel with somebody who maybe has a different opinion. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges of good communication, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, John, you mentioned another we will come back, promised we will come back to this whole area of communication, because I promised in my intro video, I promised I will grill you today. I will squeeze you on communicate all the dirty tricks in communication, so that the viewers really get something out of it. No, but one thing you just mentioned, which you studied theology. And I saw on your webpage, on your CV, on your webpage, you studied theology in Oxford, Holy Oxford.
The Holy Oxford, yes.
The Mecca, the Holy Grail of universities. And how did you come? Why did you decide to study theology? And what happened that you didn't pursue that avenue?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Christoph. I think that's the first time anybody has really asked me that in a direct way. I studied theology because I was just fascinated by the subject in itself. It didn't have I had no plan to go into the church. I had no desire to follow up with theology when I started learning about it. I was just fascinated from a purely topical point of view. I just liked the subject, and then I started to move away a little bit from it. I started to move away from theology. But before I move away from it, let me tell you how I came to it. I grew up with a church background with my mum and dad. We went to church, and it was a traditional Anglican Church of England background that I had, and I had an absolutely brilliant teacher at school. And this teacher encouraged me. He was my theology, what we call religious education teacher in a grammar school. And he was very inspiring. And I said to him, Rev Folks was his name, Reverend Folks. And I said, do you think it would be an idea for me to do this Oxford examination? It was a special Oxford entrance test. You had to show that you knew something. And so I was very fortunate to actually get a place. And as a result of studying there, I I partly moved away from religion, interestingly, because we analyzed it to death. We analyzed religion very, very exegetically, you would call it. We looked in great detail at the way the Bible and the Gospels of Jesus and the stories of Jesus, whether they were true or not, you know, whether they actually happened. And so it's only recently that I started to come back to the idea of spirituality and Christianity and religion. And I find it a really interesting topic because it helps me also personally. Spirituality, it gives me a certain footing and a grounding that I know that basically things in our crazy world, things which happen, things are always happening, but basically things are going to be okay.
Mhm.
It'll all work out in the end.
So are you practicing that by, for example, praying or meditating? How do you get this footing or this inner touch point to your spiritual base, let's say?
Well, one thing which I have been doing for many years is actually transcendental meditation, TM. And TM is it's a spiritual practice, but it's also a psychological support in order to help people to relax on a regular basis. So transcendental meditation is, it sounds very big and grand, but it's simply sitting in a chair and repeating a mantra. A mantra is a word which has no specific meaning. And this mantra is repeated. And I personally, I can speak for myself, I find myself forgetting about the mantra and going into all my crazy thoughts. And when I realize that I'm going into all my crazy thoughts, I bring my mind back to, I'm actually meditating here. And then I go back to the mantra. And so the idea of the mantra is to help you to be in the here and now. And medically, the medical, let's say, idea behind this, and lots of research has been done on meditation, is that when all these crazy thoughts come to our mind, it releases tension. So this nervous energy which we collect during our typical, you know, crazy 9 to 5 day, let's say, is allowed to flow out and to and then we're able basically to relax the body, and tests have shown that people have fewer heart attacks, they have lower blood pressure, they are more easygoing, they're not so stressed with people, and so there are lots and lots of positive consequences. And yeah, I found that very, very helpful. Sometimes I forget to do it, but I started doing it twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and now I try to do it at least once a day.
Well, so that is very interesting. Very interesting. So this is. Let me ask you one question. I'm really curious about, and actually, I am asking that question to every person I'm interviewing in these Glückskinder Talks, and probably now is exactly the right point and time to ask you, how do you define happiness?
That's a question I've been asking myself for many years. And my definition of happiness is being able to be in the here and now as much as possible, so that my mind is not taken over by all lots and lots of thoughts. That's a prerequisite for happiness. And what goes along with that is having contact with people who are like-minded, sometimes who are completely different from me. And I think it's so important to have this personal communication. And so happiness has to do with family, it has to do with friends, it has to do with enjoying the work that you do, being inspired by what you do. It has to do with, I think, ultimately, it has to do with being okay in your own skin. You're not trying to play a role. You're not trying to pretend to be somebody you're not. You're willing to say, no, don't want to do that. If somebody wants me to work with them and they're not on my wavelength, or I just get a bad vibes about them, I say, I'm sorry. I've got colleagues who I'd be happy to recommend to you, but I'm not the right person to help you. So it has to do with being able to do and say what I want to in a respectful way, and I'm doing something which I think is helpful for other people, that they get genuine benefits from. That, and I try and organize or think of happiness is, if I have a meeting with somebody like you, for example, and we're talking, my goal is a very simple one. My goal is that at the end of our conversation, you feel a little bit better than you did at the start. And if it's just a little bit better, then that for me is a successful conversation. So that's happiness to me. That's a very, very, very long way to say what's happiness to me, but it's a very difficult question. And books and books and books and films have been written about it, and I've read a lot of them, and so.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. What you were saying, not only the very end, when you were saying I'm trying to end every conversation with that feeling I contributed to something better. But I think the one element you were just saying is really very intriguing. That happiness is not that never-ending smile and a kind of a feeling which can't exist longer than a few minutes or seconds, but being content with what you do.
Yeah.
This is what I'm getting from you. This is your message. Is that right?
Exactly, Christoph. Yeah, that's it's a really good summary of what I was saying. It has to do with doing something which is valuable, which I feel valuable, which other people think is valuable, and it's something which actually helps them to either feel better about themselves, or to be able to earn money, to build a house, to look after their family. So, I'm not anti-money in any way. It might sound as though, in the spiritual direction, then it's important, not to think about material things. I don't think that's really the point. It has more to do with helping people on a practical level too. So that if they need a car, they can buy a car. If they want to retire and have some money to enjoy their retirement, then they've saved up some money. And in order to do this, then they have to have certain skills to be able to find something that they're inspired to do. And And I feel that the goal of a teacher is really not to instill things from outside on people, saying you have to learn this, but to ask them questions. I mean, as Socrates said, the idea is to ask questions to pull out what's already within them. And that's what I see my goal to be. I'm not somebody whose goal is to put stuff into people's minds, but it's to
get
draw
something.
it out. That's it, to draw it out. And that's called the Socratic method of teaching, which I strongly believe in.
Absolutely. I think it's I would say it's also a true fundamental in successful coaching. If you coach people, talking about coaching, the other big R in your life. We spoke about religion, and the other R you disclosed that some minutes ago was rugby.
That's right. Yes.
Religion and rugby, the two big R's in the life of John Doorbar. So, rugby is that good communication?
Yeah. I just to sort of set the scene of rugby. When I was 11, I always played football at school as a kid, and I was the captain of the football team. I loved it. I was crazy about it. And then,
but we talk about the real football, not the
we were
European.
talking about the real football.
Yeah.
The rugby football, which is the technical word for it. Yeah. So I had a new love, which I fell in love with when I was 10. The first time I picked up this rugby ball and ran with it, I knew that this is what I would be focused on in many times of outside curricular activities, extracurricular. No, seriously though, I just love the game. I love sport in general, but rugby has it has an incredible skill element. Most people don't see the skill element when they watch it. It looks like a free-for-all where everybody is jumping on everybody else. But if you understand the rules, you see that there is there are techniques and there's a system to the game. And when you know that, then you really are able to see how skillful these guys and girls are, because they're also lady rugby players. And I loved catching. I loved kicking. I was the guy who had to kick the ball between the posts when a try had been scored. In German, we have the word Versuch, and that's what we call a try in English, which is the equivalent of a goal in football. And so I had the responsibility of kicking the ball between the posts to add another 2 points to our score.
And you became a football coach, a rugby coach. Is that right?
That's right. When I was at university, that was the second university I went to in the northeast of England.
Yeah.
A beautiful little place called Durham. There I was also in the rugby team at the university, and the offer was available to become a qualified coach. And so I did that, and at that time I was coaching little kids, younger people, so not the guys, but school children who wanted to get the basic skills.
So if I mean, rugby is a bit a rough sport.
Yes.
Nonetheless, I could assume, or I believe, it fosters things like team spirit, common sense, Is that right? Is that something which is also intriguing you?
Yeah. Rugby is very much a communication game. Without communication, it simply doesn't work. And it's also a very fair game. Strangely enough, it doesn't look like that, but it's a very fair game. And something that's really always surprised me is that the fans at a rugby game, they're never hooligans. They just don't do that. So on the one hand, you have a game which is super violent, but the spectators are very civilized, put it that way. And in football, then you get this, the fan trouble. So that's always been an interesting point to me. But to come back to your question, the idea of communication is very important. The idea of team spirit. Games today are very, very close. The skill level is very high. And the people who actually win the game are those who have the best team spirit and the ability to have a great mental game. So this idea of it's really important what goes on within your head is hugely important, and that I think is a general thing for all things in life. The beliefs that we have, the belief systems, have a huge impact on the happiness which we have, and also our communication.
So that means what I'm hearing is you in rugby, you're actually getting trained to also be very focused on something, right?
That's right. Yeah.
What is surprising me, and maybe that now opens us the path to talk about communication. You were just saying it's a communication game. So why is it a communication game? Or how is communication in rugby working?
Well, you have to really know where people are going to be in a couple of seconds.
Without saying or yelling, but
it's a sort of combination of sensitivity to where the ball is going to go, and the ability to run to where the ball is going to go and is not actually at the moment. And you can only do that by incredible discipline, practice, and what you call grooving from a pedagogical point of view. If you groove something, then you're in the groove, and then you don't go one way or the other. And that's really important for rugby, and in fact for all sports. Golf is the same, tennis, badminton. Excuse me.
So let's maybe talk about communication. And you once mentioned to me that you have in good communication has 4 major elements or principles or fundamentals. If I recall them correctly, the why, the who, the what, the how, right? Is that right? These are the 4.
Absolutely, Christoph. You remembered them very well, yeah.
Well, I have a little cheat sheet here. John, help us. Those 4 elements or principles, what is that all about, this why and all that?
Yes, I like this model because it's very generalizable. You can use it for all communication. I personally use it to teach people the courageous presenting, or how to present courageously. But I think you can transfer it to all different communication models. And the basic principle is that if you want to say something, you have to have a big why. The big why is the motivation that you have to say anything. Why do you want to present to people? Why do I want to do what I do? What's the basic reason for me actually doing anything? And that takes some soul searching. You have to ask yourself lots and lots of not so easy questions to come to that. And it takes quite a long time to find out, what's the point, what's the meaning behind what you do. But when you've got the why and you say you really want to bring a message across, and then there are people who had really big whys, like Martin Luther King. And when you have this why, it doesn't have to be like Martin, as big as Martin Luther King. It could be that you just want to be able to give a talk in front of friends at a wedding, for example. That could be a good enough why. So you've got this at the top. That's the key, cornerstone of the whole thing. And in order to do that, you need some skills in order to do it. You need to find out who are you and who are the audience, and what's the interrelationship between you and the audience. So that's, in my opinion, that's the sort of basic homework that you need to do before you start. And then you have the what. In other words, what message are you going to bring across? That's the core argument that you want people to remember at the end of the presentation or the end of the talk. And then the third thing which is important is the how, and that's the skills part. What are you going to actually teach people to do? And that sort of brings us back to the rugby metaphor of always practicing and grooving things. Because if you're going to teach people to present, and you want it to come across as being natural, then you have to practice a lot so that it becomes in the blood. And so it might be to do with what impression do you want to give? How are you going to set the scene, the background, if you're doing it online? It could be that, what sort of body language are you going to use? I tend to use my hands a lot because that's a natural thing for me. So is that conducive to good communication? So that means, does it actually help good communication? Everything that you do should be focused on helping to bring across the message in a memorable way so that people actually get something useful at the end of it. And for me, the key thing is the take-home message. I like to imagine the situation that I do a presentation, or one of my students or people I'm teaching, they do a presentation, and then they imagine that they are in the pub and they're listening to two friends talking about the talk which they gave. For example, Christoph did this presentation today, and it was really interesting. What was the main takeaway that Christoph was trying to bring across? Oh, he didn't just try to bring it across, it was crystal clear. He wanted to demonstrate, and then the main message could be using a camera in a professional way is a way of presenting yourself in a truly professional way. So that could be the key message that you, in your own profession, might want to bring across.
Mm-hmm. And another thing which intrigued me also earlier when we spoke about Brexit, and with a bit other words, you repeated that now again. When we spoke about Brexit, you spoke about the empathy you felt for the people, and if I hear correctly, with the who, that second element, very likely a very necessary, or it's not very likely, it's actually a question to you. Is it, how necessary is it to have empathy for the people you are negotiating with? You're trying to convince them to do something. Not forcing them, but understanding them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really important, I think, Christoph. I think this whole idea of empathy has to do with people having a feeling that you have their best interests at heart. So let's imagine that I'm selling, or I'm talking about a presentation course which I'm doing, and I'd be interested in them taking part. And let's imagine I set a price, and let's imagine that at the moment they're in a sort of difficult financial situation. It would not really be ethically correct for me to say, okay, it costs €1,000 and they've only got 300 in the bank. And so it's a sort of a way of understanding people on a deeper level, I think, so that you can say, look, we can find another solution. We can come up with a quid pro quo solution. In other words, I help you with this and you can help me with that. It's a sort of a barter system. And that's the whole point of money, really, that I want something and you have something. So if you give me this, then I can give you that. That's the point of money. And so this empathy thing is also extremely important if you really want to sell something, if you want to sell an idea. Without empathy, there's an immediate block to your ideas. And scientists have actually analyzed this. And Cialdini, in his book, Influence, the Science and Practice, he talks about the idea of give and take. People need this idea of being given to and getting something back. And it's a basic human need which we have. And so the whole idea of, if I say something nice, pleasant to somebody, then the likelihood of them saying something nice to me is raised. And consequently, the general atmosphere, and when we go back to spirituality, I would call this the Schwingung, the way in which the material content of our universe is raised. So if somebody's depressed, then they have no energy, and the way in which the waves are moving is on a very flat level. If somebody's excited and interested, then there's more life, there's more energy to it. That goes into the metaphysical direction, spirituality and physics. But from my research, I'm 100% convinced that spirituality and modern day physics, which was started by Einstein and Heisenberg and Bohr, has a very, very close relationship. In fact, they're the same thing.
Mhm.
That's a completely different story. That can take us off into hours and hours of fascinating discussion.
Which is actually a very good point to also show, if you want to do that, to open up a long journey with John, which I only can encourage you to do so, visit his homepage, johndoorbar.com, and I like very much what he states there on his header: refine your language, inspire others, and change the world. Great stuff. So you should definitely contact John, talk with him about that, and I'm sure he has a lot of very good tricks, maybe some dirty tricks, how to convince people. But talking about, well, it's not a dirty trick, but probably one of the biggest secrets of good communication we just spoke about is empathy, show empathy. And so maybe you can disclose also something from the how section. How can I convince somebody to do something he never planned to do? To buy that old car he never wanted, but you want to get rid of this old car.
Right. Reading between the lines there, Christoph, that's a tricky question. That's a trick question. I'm only really interested in selling anything to anybody who is 100% behind the idea. That doesn't mean that I'm not trying to change people's minds to get them to behave differently, but it's important that when they buy something from me, that they get something genuinely of value, and not some sort of old banger which will break down on the motorway after 10 minutes of driving it, and then they will get a dartboard at home and get some darts, put my picture on the dartboard, and then throw darts for the rest of their life. That's not my idea of a good sale, Christoph.
So I will not squeeze you on that one anymore. But I want to ask you one thing which is actually very, very inspiring, is inspire others and change the world. Is that kind of a goal of yours? Are you aiming to inspire others and change the world?
Yeah, well, I'm inspired to inspire those people who I'm with at the moment. Put it that way, one person at a time. And if I can have an enjoyable hour and a half with some clients who are interested in what I do, and I'm able to inspire those 3 people in a small group, then that's good enough for me. And by inspiring them, my idea is that it has a ripple effect, that they think, oh yeah, that was really good. I'd like to teach you something that we learned from this English guy, and it could be helpful for you too. So that really is the idea of inspiring others that I understand. And if you're able to inspire enough people, then you do make changes, and that's what these great communicators have actually done. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, they've actually changed the world, but they've done it by doing it one person at a time. So that's how I would answer that question, Christoph.
John, you disclosed me in one of our conversations we had. You have a very, challenging goal set to yourself. Is you want to get to something like 1 million followers or 1 million subscribers in, I don't know, YouTube or social media or wherever. Wherever you will do that, 1 million is quite a number.
Yes.
So tell me, why do you want that? And how are you going to do that?
It has partly to do with this question that you just asked me, this idea of inspiring as many people as I can. So, and it also has to do with people who I know, friends of mine. There's a wonderful person who I've met recently. He's from Australia, and he talks about dreaming big, and he has written 7 bestsellers and sold 6 million copies. And his name is Andrew Matthews. And I said to Andrew, we were having a conversation like you and I, Christoph. I said to Andrew, how many people have you actually spoken to? He's also a public speaker. And I was expecting, a big number like 100. And you'll never guess how many, he said. 30,000, John. 30,000. And I nearly dropped off my seat. I said, 30,000, how do you do that? And he said, well, John, you just imagine you're talking to one person as I'm talking to you now. And so from that, I was inspired by him. I thought, well, okay, I'm not him. But the idea of thinking big is, okay, I might not make it. I might make 100,000. I might make 10,000. But it's better to make a smaller number and go for a bigger one than not to start at all. That's how I see it. So you could call it what they say in psychology, a stretch goal. You have to stretch for it. But the advantage of it is that because I have this idea in mind, it helps me to focus and also to learn new stuff, learn new things from people like you, Christoph, to be able to move on and to get to know new people, to be able to make contact with more larger groups of people, to complete getting my book published, which I hope will happen in the next 2 months. And so there are, things which contribute to that. And it might take me 10 years, it might take me 20 years, I might never be able to do it, but it's I think it's a goal to go for. One step at a time.
So, talking about stretch goals, which actually is a philosophy also large corporations like Intel are using when managing people, is setting stretched goal, more or less maybe nearly unachievable goals, but to motivate yourself to go maybe that extra mile or to be motivated. This is what I'm hearing, right?
Yes. I think there's a difference between the way in which they present that.
Yeah.
I largely hear in companies that people who have these stretch goals, it's sort of enforced on them very often. And it's a sort of manipulative tool which the managers sometimes use. And I don't think that's really really helpful. And I think a big part of the jigsaw puzzle they've missed out there, and that's the why. The big why that we talked about before. brings us back to this whole point of why. If people don't have a why, then there's no real reason for them to really do things which will move them in the direction of the goal. Even money is only to a certain extent a motivating factor. So I think the managers, the leaders, need to help people, coach the people to understand, what's the advantage of them doing a good job. Well, it means, they can have a good atmosphere in the office. That means that their mental health is improved. It means that they are physically healthier, that their families in turn, they have a happier life. They're not blown out with stress. All these things which contribute to what I understand a happy life, which is what we talked about earlier, is that there are lots of questions. It's not just a question of having a super stretch goal. It's to do with the way in which it's explained to the people so that they really take it on board and they get it in their blood, really. I think that's the point.
So, John, you were speaking about 1,010,000, more in terms of an inspiring stretched goal.
Yeah.
So how would you, now getting towards the end of our conversation, but one question, one takeaway I would like to get from you is, how do you define success?
I think success and happiness are very closely interconnected. Success for me is getting up in the morning, being happy to be able to do what you're going to do, even if sometimes you have bad days. But generally, you enjoy what you're doing. You enjoy being with the people who you're with. You're able to handle the ups and downs of life in a way which is honorable, to say, use a big word, honest, fair, and to enjoy yourself, just to enjoy your life, because our lives are very short. When you think of the grand design and time eternal, our 60 years and 70 years if you're lucky, then it's a very short time. So what's the point of being miserable?
A very good point. Yeah, and I like that very much, what you're saying, that actually happiness and success are relatives, are very close to each other. And John, we already exceeded our time by far.
Oh, we have.
Yeah. And I could continue, and maybe one day we should have a part 2. Latest when you reach 500K of subscribers, wherever, however. Well, no, then I'm going to ask you, how the heck did you do that?
Oh, right.
And John, it was a tremendous pleasure having you as a very inspirational counterpart this night, and sharing so many thoughts, disclosing so many secrets, like the 2 big R's in your life, your definition of happiness, your definition of success, and all that. Thank you very much, John, for being with me tonight.
It's my pleasure, Christoph, and thank you very much for inviting me. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, John. So let me briefly tell you what is going to happen in the next 2 Glückskinder Talks as we are continuing our journey talking to very inspiring people. So on May 4, I'm going to talk to a very interesting lady with 2 occupations, professions. So she's on the one hand an SAP project manager, and at the same time a brilliant piano player, a musician. And the interesting thing about that is that she was she just started playing the piano just a few years ago, and that was always a well-kept secret, and until one day she decided, now I'm going to play piano, and now she actually is selling also evenings with her as a piano player. And so we are going to talk with her about that. And another lady on June 1, Alice Yoon, who is a career coach, a very successful career coach, and with a multicultural background also. And so a lot to talk about with a lot of very interesting people. So thank you very much for joining, and thanks again, John, for being on the show. And see you on May 4 and June 1. And this show actually will be soon available on, I think, also on John's homepage, as well as on my homepage, in any case on YouTube and Facebook. Have a great evening and see you soon.
Yeah, goodbye. Thank you.